What are some others that you like to forage?
Yeah. So St. John's wort is a huge one, especially for the Pacific Northwest. It grows like a weed, so this is for sure one, and they even spray it a lot in public places. You do not want to harvest St. John's wort in any urban area, by any roadsides. You want to go out to the woods for this, but it's got this little star-like yellow flower, and it is bright and sunny looking, and it brings like a brightness to your life because it helps with depression, and specifically depression that is in relation to like anger, frustration, or depression that is seasonal. So I love them. Like, I feel like the more I study plants, the more I am just in awe of how intricate and thorough God planned things. Cause I'm like, there's hints. There's always like hints to what this plant will help you with, when you should be harvesting it, and when it's sunny, when it's bright, in the hot summer, June, July, August, it will be blooming, and it brings like a brightness to your life if you're feeling down and out, and you have that hint because it's bright, it's yellow, it brings that joy, brings that light.
Welcome to the Soul Summit podcast. I'm your host, Courtney Preedy. I'm here to help bridge the gap for women and families in the outdoors, build a community of adventure junkies, and roll out your weekly dose of positive vibes. With almost 2 decades in the health and fitness world and an untamable passion for hunting in the outdoors, my mission is to help you live your bucket list life and move boldly in the direction of your dreams. Meet us here weekly as I connect with like-minded outdoor men and women to discuss health and mindset, accountability, life and entrepreneurship, as well as all things hunting and epic untold stories. We're going to hop right back into another episode of the Soul Summit podcast. And the beautiful woman's on the other side of the screen today, Tawny Leger. I'm so excited to have you on. Why don't you give us a little bit of a kind of a backstory, who you are, Tawny?
My name's Tawny, and I grew up in the country, grew up in the woods. I grew up at my dad's elk camp. Every September, he would go out archery camping, and we were in wall tents and at the base camp. And my mom would homeschool us, and we spent just so much time in nature and really found our place at home there. We always looked forward to archery camp every fall. But as I grew up, I wasn't just like a place of like going for rest. It also was like, wow, there's so much to be enjoyed and harvested and used out in the wilderness. And when I became a mom, my idea as far as what I'm using on my skin, what I'm ingesting, what medicines I'm using, what's in my kids' Tylenol, all those questions. I think like a lot of moms, like you start wondering, what am I exposing myself to? And so that really began this journey of wanting to get back to more natural-based lifestyle and really working in congruence with nature, with God's creation, and stewarding that well, both my own body and my children now who depend on me to give them good things and put good things in their body and on their body. And so that's really kind of launched me into this version of natural living where I'm harvesting deer off the land and yarrow off the land, and really working with God's creation instead of against it is really kind of my mindset.
Well, there's so many natural things in our everyday lives. You know, we can go out on a hike and hit the mountains and find so many different things, as opposed to going to a market where you don't know how it's been formulated or what the ingredients are. Just like you said, it's so important. And I think that for a lot of people, I think that almost did like 2020 kind of spark like a bigger initiation in this whole arena, I feel like, because we started maybe a little bit of distrust for what we were being told and then started to really question those things. So kind of walk us through a little bit of what it looks like for you and your family, because I know you just don't go out there alone. What does it look like for you to get out there and actually, find these plants? Are these things that they're there ahead of time? Do you just kind of go out blindly and hope that you find what you're looking for? What does it look like for you when you're going to go out and forage?
A lot of times hard things will propel us into good things. And so though 2020 brought a lot of hard and a lot of really lame experiences for a lot of people, like a lot of people went through some really hard times that year. I personally went to the library and bought lots of medicinal foraging books for my region. That was one thing that we did because like a lot of people, just getting basic care during then, if you weren't at a certain level of emergency, you couldn't even get basic care. And so, though it had been my heart to like do natural living since about more and more since 2016 when I had my first child, but 2020 really put a lot more wind behind those sails and a lot more motivation. And when my kids had a cold, I started harvesting mullein flower, and then that would subside their cough. And it was like, wow, this isn't just like, there's different variations of natural. And sometimes people will try one natural thing and they think, oh, that didn't work, so natural things don't work. And that's just not the case. There's different spectrums of natural things that you can harvest and use. And are they, in what concentration is it going to be useful is really kind of the key. And so I found out that, wow, these things actually are working. And I started testing and experimenting more and more on me first, of course, and then allowing my kids to use it as well. But what's really neat is, though, there are still side effects from natural things, because it doesn't, if you don't need blood thinners, but you're taking something that will thin your blood too much and you don't need that, comes a point where, okay, there are some side effects there that maybe you need to lay off of it, or something that's not like natural doesn't mean no side effects.
Sure.
However, there is a lot of things like over-the-counter aspirin can cause ulcers. However, willow is a natural aspirin and actually can heal ulcers. And so I love finding out more and more of that information of like what is actually not just no side effects, but actually better in general for the body, for the person. And so 2020 really, it made me ask even more questions than I already was asking. Like a lot of people, I think a lot of people got there. And I was like, though the circumstances were lame in many regards, I think a lot of people's eyes were opened. They started asking really good questions for the first time in decades. I mean, we're not doing anything new. Like my herbalism journey is not new, it's old. And so what we're really doing is getting back to our roots, no pun intended, but we're getting back to our roots and doing what has worked for many centuries. It's what God has given us already. And he knew when he created willow that it would help us with our headaches and that it would help heal our ulcers instead of, this chemical-based alternative that's supposed to imitate that. The imitation is usually not as good as the original, right?
I think it's such a good reminder too that, he did create all things, for the greater good, right? And many of those things are for either our enjoyment or for our bodies, for our overall health and wellness. So walk us through putting your family in the car and heading out to go and forage. Are you guys going to familiar places that you go to frequently? Are you trying new spots? And are there any considerations when you're going in to do some foraging on checking if the land itself, if the area is being treated, or if they're doing any of those kind of practices in that area?
Yes, definitely. Such good questions. So it's everything from our front yard, our backyard, the neighboring pastures that we're going into, to the mountaintops that we hike and backpack into. And so we forage many places, but one of the common sense foraging tips that I for sure want to share today is like any spot that's going to be having road runoff or would be likely sprayed. So like, highway sides, you might be like, oh, wow, there's a bunch of elderberries or there's a bunch of mullein there that I could go harvest. Well, if it's on right by the side of the road, chances are it is a sponge. And so chances are it's going to be absorbing all those toxins, and some will absorb more than others, but definitely do not harvest where there's going to be chemical spray, because it's going to defeat the purpose anyways, road runoff, anything like that. If there's like non-organic farms next to it, I would also say that's not going to be medicine. That's now going to be a carcinogen, likely. And that's a sad reality. But, we use organic methods on our farm. And so I know, and we've been there for several years. And so I know it's relatively safe. I can't say that the owner before me didn't, but once you get about 3 years out, usually a lot of that cleanses out. Not that it's not forever there, but it's at least improved. The soil is improved after so many years of not putting toxins on it.
So here would be my example. I am pretty anti-crossbow, Roundup, those kinds of things.
Mhm.
However, we on our property we have poison oak, and so we do every once in a while we'll get it out and we'll treat, spot treat the poison oak that's growing. I also have a beautiful patch of nettles, that I would like, but I worry, because I've sprayed any kind of that, toxin poison on my land. Would you consider it safe if it's far enough away?
Yeah, so nettle is one of those ones that absorbs even more than others. So as far as like the toxicity transferring into a nettle it will be there, especially if it's in close proximity. Honestly, sometimes I even ask the Lord, I'm like, Lord, will you teach me how to cultivate your land? Like, I know that sounds so ethereal and so out there, but if you're spraying this year, maybe there's some things that you could plant in that region that would then take over in a really good way, like things that aren't going to be poison oak, but will take over in a really good way. And so 3 years down the road, when it's starting to clear from the soil, then you will know, okay, it's healthier. It's now kind of been filtered out some. And so I would feel comfortable 3 years down the road harvesting that nettle if you can kind of get something to take over. Because whenever we take something out, if we don't put something back in that will take over, it will eventually come back. Usually, one of the great things that you can, like if people who are trying to treat their lawn, a lot more people who are wanting to do foraging around their property will start putting clover, because clover will absolutely take over. Now you have a clover lawn now, but it's soft, it's sustainable, it's actually edible, and it's medicinal. It's really good for women's hormones. A lot of people like moving towards a clover lawn instead. That is something that will totally take over. But that's definitely got to be between you and your decisions. I would wait about 3 years. And that's pretty standard for organic farms. If you want to actually become a certified organic farm, you have to have no chemicals, no non-organic chemicals on your property for 3 years. So that's not my opinion. That's like farming standards.
Sure. And I do see this big kind of uptick in people planting instead of having that nice sod, and that beautifully landscaped, perfect yard. We're seeing a lot more usable features being planted around, whether it's like you said, planting clover instead of grass or allowing that to take over, or even just planting herbs and different things that you can pick throughout. Let's talk about what some of your favorite foraging items are.
Actually, that leads right into changing my own lawn and garden, because yarrow is absolutely one of my favorites. It's a natural blood stop. So I make my own natural blood stop powder that my kids use. It's super safe, and it's really simple. That's the great thing about foraging. You can get really technical. You can get way down into the science of it all. But really, if you can identify the plant, know its main use, then you can be a forager. You can be an herbalist. Like, you don't need a bunch of letters behind your name. I certainly don't. Well, the letters behind my name have to do with an English degree, not a science degree. So, but I've since moving towards this more usable features in my garden, my landscape. I now grab yarrow from the wild and I plant it in my garden beds around my house, and it takes over. Some people even would say it's almost invasive, but it's a beautiful plant. The bees love it. It's a natural blood stop. It's totally natural. There's I've had no adverse side effects from it. My kids haven't. And it's been a huge blessing for my family, which one of my favorite stories, which is going to be a little bit of a tangent, but Eliza, my oldest daughter, she gave me permission to share this story too. She is more inclined to get bloody noses, and it's really dry in our area. So the summertime will bring a lot of nosebleeds. And because we have this natural blood stop everywhere, she will go out the moment she has a bloody nose. She won't even get me anymore. And this started when she was 6. Like, she was so empowered as a 6-year-old that when she had a bloody nose, she wasn't even running to me anymore. She'd be like, "Mom, I need yarrow." And she'd run out the front door, grab some yarrow, squish it up a little bit so all those properties are oozing out of it, and she'd stick it up her nose, and her nosebleed was gone almost immediately, way faster than like any other method she'd ever used. So I just love that right outside in my garden bed, by the front of my house, she can just go out and get the medicine she needs when she needs it. And there's other things that can help with that, but it was so empowering for her to be able to do that right away because it's just right in my front yard. It's a beautiful thing.
Absolutely. Well,
Yeah.
and that goes back to you, mom.
Yeah.
It's definitely so empowering to give your kiddos those skills, because those are things that they'll be able to utilize forever. So kudos to you.
Yeah. Yeah. Yarrow, that's a big one. And a second one that just grows as like a weed everywhere near my front yard is also narrow leaf plantain. That's a huge one. And she will treat her own bee stings when she gets stung by a wasp. She'll go out, mash it up, and make a little poultice out of it and stick it on her bee sting, and it just draws it right out, removes the inflammation. And I'm like, it's so cool to get to see my kids treating themselves. Like, they'll tell me what they're doing, but it's empowering for them to be able to give themselves
Right.
medicine from God's creation right out our front door.
What are some others that you like to forage?
Yeah. So St. John's wort is a huge one, especially for the Pacific Northwest. It grows like a weed, so this is for sure one, and they even spray it a lot in public places. You do not want to harvest St. John's wort in any urban area, by any roadsides. You want to go out to the woods for this, but like it's got this little star-like yellow flower, and it is bright and sunny looking, and it brings like a brightness to your life because it helps with depression, and specifically depression that is in relation to like anger, frustration, or depression that is seasonal. So I love them. Like, I feel like the more I study plants, the more I am just in awe of how intricate and thorough God planned things. Cause I'm like, there's hints. There's always like hints to what this plant will help you with, when you should be harvesting it, and when it's sunny, when it's bright, in the hot summer, the beginning of summer, throughout the hot, like June, July, August, it will be blooming, and it brings like a brightness to your life if you're feeling down and out, and you have that hint because it's bright, it's yellow, it brings that joy, brings that light, shines that into, yes, that is it. And it is glorious. It is so good. So I take that all the time. It's wonderful. You can just put it in a tea. It's super easy. It's simple, and it's I've had zero side effects from it. So I can't say that there's never going to be some. I don't want to ever lead someone astray, but it's very mild and great. Mullein is like the super plant, and it will grow anywhere where soil is kind of disturbed, like rocky, ugly areas. It'll be there. And we like to call its nickname is cowboy toilet paper. You can use it as toilet paper if you're in a pinch. The root, the leaves, the flower, it's all medicinal. They actually will make like an ear oil out of the flower if you have an earache. You can use the flower for a cough suppressant. It's what they call an expectorant, which is just a fancy word for getting the mucus out, so that you can breathe and stop coughing. That one was probably one of the best cough suppressants I have used on my kids.
Wow.
Ever, hands down. So I just will add a couple of flowers and a little bit of honey and lemon, and that will subside my kids' cough, and they can sleep through the night and get better faster because they're sleeping. Because we all know if we're not sleeping and resting, it's really hard to get better. But if we're coughing, we're not sleeping. And so that's what I use when my kids have a cough. And you can dry those, put them in a jar, keep them all winter long when you do need them. That's a huge one. And the leaves are amazing. When I'm out in the heat of the summer and I'm on my feet gardening and working my homestead like all day, I basically live outside when the weather gets nice. Sometimes my feet and my knees will get hot and swollen. I just grab a mullein leaf, I put it in my sock, and it helps draw out all of the inflammation from your body. And so then my knees aren't aching, my feet aren't aching, they're not as swollen at the end of the day, and it's such a gift. I love mullein. It's the leaf you can make a tea from, the root you can make a tea from, and the flower you can make a tea from, and they will all help with your cough.
That's amazing. Now I'm hearing a lot of kind of different applications. We've talked about ointments. We've talked about, teas. So walk us through kind of a general overview of the different ways that you can use them. And then maybe kind of clarify, are you able to use every plant the same? I'm guessing the answer is no, but talk to us about that.
Yeah. So when I'm in the field, like when I'm out in the backcountry and I'm backpacking or camping, or even just like on my farm and we need something in a pinch, the two methods I use the most for using medicinal plants are a poultice, because that's as simple as you can just like smash it up with a clean rock or something like that. We will usually, like if I need yarrow to be in a poultice to like stop some blood on a wound or a gash, I will just throw it in my mouth and chew it. And it's not like, it's going to taste earthy. It's not like
Mm-hmm.
terrible tasting, but it also isn't like, wow, this is amazing. It's getting the job done. So I'll chew it, make it into what they call a poultice. And it's like this, flour paste basically. And I will put that on the spot that needs the medicine. And that's a pretty common practice, making a poultice. And no, I've had friends at our house when they've gotten stung by a wasp, and I do not chew it for them. I will bring it inside, I'll rinse it for them, and then I'll make a poultice with that narrowleaf plantain and put it on their wound, and then use some of that Coban wrap to like keep it on there to draw out the stinger. But a poultice, that's really common. And then when I'm out in the field, a tea is really easy because I always have water and I always have a means to boil my water. And so if if you have diarrhea, well, not that this is a fun topic, but if you have diarrhea when you're out in the field, pine needles are really good to suppress that. They will calm all the muscles and they will help you to not have diarrhea. And Lord knows that is not fun when you're out at like elk camp or deer camp to have diarrhea. So you could just go pick a few pine needles, throw it in your tea. You don't want to boil the pine needles. You want to pour hot water over the pine needles. You don't want to like keep them in a boiling, simmering pot because they'll lose some of that properties that help with that. But so teas and poultices are what I use kind of on the go. That's what I use on the go. When I am harvesting like St. John's wort from my field and I want to keep it all winter, I prefer to dry it as a tea, or I will make tinctures with it as well. And tinctures it sounds really intimidating, and you can get down to like the math and the super nitty gritty science of it all. But really, for most people, if you're not going to be like putting it on a shelf, like selling it as a product somewhere, you can use what they call the folk method of tinctures. Basically, if you had a mason jar, you would just fill up with plant material to the top and then pour an alcohol that's 80 proof or better over that. And then keep that in a dark storage, which is just as simple as a cabinet, a pantry cabinet. Keep that in that for like 4 to 6 weeks. And most tinctures can be made that way. That's a pretty basic, and they call that the folk method because that's what Native Americans were doing. That's what people did for centuries before we had weight scales to say, okay, am I exactly 1 part to 5 parts? And so now that we have weight scales and we can be a little more specific, and if you do want to like start making tinctures to sell at a farmer's market or something of that sort, the standard tincture math is 1 part to 5 parts. So 1 part plant material to 5 parts of alcohol. There are some plants, very few, that I would be using, but there are some plants that are really strong and maybe you don't want that strong of a dosage. And so you're going to do 1 to 10. But by and large, most plants, most places are going to be 1 part to 5 parts. So it's really, I think people get really intimidated by medicinal foraging. Like, oh, I can't do it. I don't have an herbalist degree, or I haven't studied this for years. You can go to the library. You can get a free book that tells you what's in your region. And then you can be making these tinctures in your cabinet, which will take 4 to 6 weeks. And you can have your own antidepressant of St. John's wort all winter long. Now, if you don't want to do an alcohol-based, if someone wants to steer away from alcohol, you can also just make a tea. Just dry the leaves, dry the herb, whatever it is, dry the bark. I usually make willow bark tea, which tastes disgusting because it tastes like you're drinking aspirin. It tastes like aspirin, but you just chug it and it's fine. But you can dry those out and have them as tea if you wanted to avoid alcohol. So you don't have to use that version if that's not for you. But it's really that simple. Other people will make like a cold infusion where they'll just let it sit in some cold water for 48 hours. They'll make a hot infusion depending on the plant, which is going to be more like a woody plant, and then more leafy you'd want to do cold. So there's different tips and tricks of the trade, but really it's not that complicated. And I think people get intimidated by it.
Sure.
It's really simple.
talk to me about washing. When we get any of our traditional produce, we wash it thoroughly. Does that practice at all change if you're foraging organic, wild grown?
I'm sure there will be other people with other opinions on this, but honestly, if there's no noticeable like bugs on it, I would put it straight in my mouth and put it straight on my wound. If I know that it's not going to have chemicals on it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when I'm buying produce from the store, I have no idea if, did the person who picked this, did they wash their hands after using the restroom? Are there chemicals? Are there pesticides?
Right.
Is there cross, pesticides that are coming over from the neighboring farm, even though they're organic? How far away is the pesticides from them? So there's a lot more variables that I care about when it comes to bringing something home from the store. If it's out in the woods and there's, a bug or two, it's like, okay, you shake it off, you put it in your mouth, you drink the hot tea. And especially if you're making it into a tea, like it's going to kill anything anyways that's living on it. So I'm very loose about washing. Now, when I do have friends over who are maybe not as natural minded as me, I'll rinse it for them under my faucet if we're at our house. And that's just as like a gesture to say,
I see you.
Yeah, I see you. I see you. Exactly. Now, for me and my kids, I'm like, what's a bug or two? It's fine. You're just whatever.
I know when it comes to foraging mushrooms, there can be certain mushrooms that have lookalikes. Do you typically run into the same thing with wild plants?
Yes, there are some. And you can actually get a short list. Like if you rent a book from the library or buy one, I have some good recommendations we can put in the show notes or something. But if you know the toxic plants in your region, it makes it really easy to just avoid them. And if there's something that you have doubts or questions, I absolutely would get a field guide and go back to that plant if possible and identify fully before harvesting. Like I would rather err on the side of caution than like, is this poisonous or not poisonous? And so, which is one of my intimidations with mushrooms. I am not yet confident in harvesting and eating mushrooms on my own if I don't have an experienced person with me. That is one of my goals for this year, but that's it. Into that part, I'm still like, there's so many lookalikes and toxic varieties that I feel like there's less in my region as far as plants, but there are some. Like we have poison hemlock. But if you know it's lookalike, you can identify it easily and avoid it.
Trust that instinct too. Like if you have questions about it, it's always a safe bet to just, confirm before you consume. Definitely.
Yes. Love that.
Now you've talked a lot about God and faith and all of that. I want to talk about the connection between the outdoors and faith for you and what that looks like.
Yeah. God is, big in my life and I see everything through that lens. And the more I study anything in nature, I am just continually like, this has to be intelligent design. Like think about how specific and useful this tool is out in creation that was for us to steward well and to enjoy. And so being a believer and being out in nature, like we still need that. We still need community. Like I don't want to fall in the rut of like me and Jesus in the woods. We still need community. We still need our people. But there's this beautiful connection that we get to just slow down and enjoy. Like, wow, God, like you made St. John's wort, this bright sunny flower to bring like a little brightness inside of me as well in the middle of the dark winter. And I'm continually in awe of how he created things, why he created things, how it interacts with the rest of the world around us in this symbiotic relationship of helping different things. And it's hard to not praise God when I'm out in the woods, like it just oozes out of me as I'm like, God, you're amazing. Like, how did you even think to make this intricate, small, finite thing, but it's so useful. It's beautiful. And I think it shifts my perspective now being into foraging and herbalism, just the fact that there is like beauty and order and purpose inside of creation. It just points me right back to God every time that there is beauty and order and purpose in me and in this world. And it's not by accident. Like there is a plan and an intention behind everything.
I have to imagine, and this just was me kind of like daydreaming about this like whimsical mountaintop, where you get to just kind of wander through and pick your way through and forage that, I feel like that has to bring the Lord joy, to watch somebody just savoring that intentional creation. It's such a beautiful thing to really get to utilize the gifts that are at our fingertips. Like they truly are gifts. And what some person might look out their window or be driving by and see a weed, there's so much power and there's so much healing that can be had in that plant. So I think it's just an incredible thing.
Yes, I love that thought. God just enjoying us, enjoying his creation. It's got to bring him so much joy. I mean, just like as us as parents, as we look at our kids enjoying something so good
Right.
and rich and something that's good for them, we're just like, it's so fulfilling.
Yes.
Yeah. If you have young kids and you have not foraged with them yet, just buckle up. It is going to be the funnest thing. My kids, as I unpack like what this plant can do and what this plant can do, they're just continually like, they have such good questions and it's such rich dialogue just talking with them about how this plant can help them and what this ailment will go away if you take this. They are way more amazed and way more enthusiastic than most adults. And so it'll just come out of them, the excitement and the awe and the wonder. It's like it'll breathe life into your foraging adventures. Bring some young kids. If you don't have young kids, bring a niece or nephew and find some young kids. Like it will be so fun.
Speaking of faith, you are hosting the Women's Faith Retreat here in Fall Creek, Oregon. I would love for you to share with our listeners a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So we are going to be diving into the topic of biblical joy, which I have just like, that is my jam. That is what I love to talk about because biblical joy is not just like, it's not just a smile on your face. It's not just a happy experience, but like a deep rooted inside your soul confidence in Christ that he is good, he is sovereign, and he wishes the best for you. And so we're going to be diving into that with some awesome ladies in a community of gals that want to do a little adventure, want to have a little restorative retreat. We'll do a little cold therapy, a little hot therapy. We'll do some hiking. We'll get to explore God's creation together. Maybe we'll even point out a few medicinal plants along the way. And then we'll have some really rich conversations around the fire and just chat about joy. And we're going to chat about killing comparison and how that robs our joy and what it means to have joy in spite of hard circumstances and what it means to have joy when there's grief in our life. Like this is not going to be a surface level conversation. This is going to be a deep, rich conversation about what that means to follow Christ and have joy along the way.
I'm so excited for this retreat and, the foundation of that biblical joy and getting to uncover what that looks like in every season and how you can really, lean into that when life is not always great, right? There's always, things that can happen and some opposition that will come up or, loss, but there is always a way to seek the joy. And so I'm very excited about that. We're also interlacing, like you alluded to, some adventure in there. So we're really looking forward to that. We'll be doing some paddle boarding and so just fun ways of kind of filling that cup and making sure that you go home on fire and reignited. So we're definitely looking forward to that. That's going to be June 26th through the 29th in Fall Creek, Oregon. And we're doing an exclusive. So this won't be shared anywhere else, but only in this podcast episode. We're doing a 15% off code. You can also find it in the show notes. It's HOJ-faith-25, and that will save you 15%. So make sure you head over to the Her Outdoor Journey website. You can find that over there or of course in the show notes, but really, really excited to have you coming in to just breathe life into these women. It's going to be incredible. You're also doing one of the segments on our masterclasses with the pros series. So if you would just walk us through a bit of what they can expect if they sign up for that masterclass with you.
So if you liked today's topic, we are going to be diving even deeper into medicinal foraging. I'm going to be showing you how to make your own willow bark tincture in like live. And so you'll be able to have your own aspirin for the year if you need that. We're also going to be making our own St. John's wort tincture, which is going to be amazing. And then we're also going to be talking about different ways you can use mullein. So we'll really be focusing on these really common, really useful. They grow most places. And so even if you're not in the Pacific Northwest, this can likely be applicable to your region as well. And we're just so excited to dive deeper into that and show you guys a little bit more specifically how we can do that.
We want these listeners to be equipped, that's for sure. And I am really looking forward to diving into that and getting just the hands-on experience of getting to make that ourselves. So it's going to be really awesome. Yes. Let people know where they can find you, because there's not just, all of these topics we talked about today. There's so much more depth to you, and you share your beautiful like homesteading and your journey online. But where can people reach out and find you?
Yeah, so I am on Instagram at The Mountain Mama. Nothing else in it, just The Mountain Mama. And that's where I will share also different benefits of other natural things. I do my own line of natural skincare of beef tallow. I cure it from Idaho cattle up here and where I'm at. And I render it all the way down to my own face cream and products with that. And so, and then I also will just share a little on homeschool, homesteading, and then natural living. That's kind of my umbrella that I live in.
We'll definitely give her a shout. You just recently did a little bit of a behind the scenes on making your beef tallow. And I will say I have bought your tallow and I love it. It's heavenly. It smells amazing, which can be tricky with beef tallow, and it's divine. So definitely go over there and check that out. I wish we had more time for today. There's so much we could talk about, but looking forward to having you on with masterclasses with the pros. You can find the link to sign up for that in the show notes, as well as some other resources from today. But we're going to be doing this again soon for sure. Yes. This won't be the last we see of Tawny on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me today.
The Soul Summit podcast is brought to you by Maven Optics, Baku e-bikes, Hoyt Archery, Onyx Maps, and Sawyer Products. For more information on these companies or to access the Soul Summit podcast discount codes, be sure to check out our show notes.